These are the 10 biggest bombs in MTG Spider-Man. If you see these cards in draft or sealed, you should really try to fit them into your deck because these all-stars are amazing and will help you win more games. First up is Behold the Sinister Six. For 6 into black, you get a sorcery that says, return up to 6 target creature cards with different names from your graveyard to the battlefield. Now this card is just a 1-card army. In draft, you're going to generally be able to trade off at least a few creatures by the time you get to turn 7. So even if you're not bringing back the full 6 creatures, bringing back 2, 3, or 4 creatures is still going to be a massive swing to the game and generally propel you to victory. If you're behind, this is the sort of card that can single-handedly pull you out of whatever deficit you find yourself in. And if you're ahead, this card isn't necessarily going to do as much because maybe more of your creatures are alive, but in those games you don't necessarily need the help as much. Also, because you know this card is coming, you can make sure that you trade off your creatures, even if it's an unfavorable trade, like maybe trading your 6/6 creature for your opponent's 4/4 creature by making an attacking, letting them double block. You know you're going to be bringing that creature right back, and so you can make these sorts of trades, play with this card in mind, and absolutely devastate your opponent. This is one that's going to be swinging a lot of games, and hopefully you're going to be the one casting it. Next is Mysterio, Master of Illusion. For 3 into blue, you get a 3/3 human villain that says, when Mysterio enters, create a 3/3 blue illusion villain creature token for each non-token villain you control. Exile those tokens when Mysterio leaves the battlefield. So at the very least, you're going to get Mysterio, and since Mysterio is a villain, you're going to get at least one of those 3/3 tokens, but there are plenty of villains in this set at all rarities, so you're going to often be able to set this up to be able to get 2, 3, or maybe even more of those illusion tokens, because Mysterio is going to count as 1, and then you have a couple of villains in play and just make a single 1-card army. Now, if Mysterio dies, you do lose all of those extra tokens, but if you can keep Mysterio around for even 1 turn, you can swing in with all those tokens. It's basically like the equivalent of playing like a 4-mana 9/9 or something like that. If you can get a couple of those tokens, sure, your opponent might have the removal spell, but if they don't, you're going to absolutely devastate them. And Mysterio is, again, the sort of card that can swing a game single-handedly and just put tons of power and toughness into play. And it's especially good if you have some sorts of protection spells where you can give Mysterio hexproof to protect from that first removal spell, or maybe have a counter spell to protect him, things like that. Mysterio is absolutely the sort of card that can take over a game. Next is Miles Morales. So for 1 and a green, you get a 1/2 human citizen hero. When Miles enters, put a +1/+1 counter on each of up to 2 target creatures. So at the very least, Miles is going to come in and can be a 2/3 himself, and then put a counter on something else, which is really good for 2 mana. So that's not to be understated. You play 2 mana, 2/3 plus a counter on something else. That's already a fantastic card. But it also has the ability 3 green, white, red, transform Miles Morales, activate only as a sorcery, and Miles will transform into Ultimate Spider-Man, which is going to have first strike and haste. Remember, if Miles had the counter on him already, then it's going to be having that counter when it flips over. So it'll be a 5/4 at that point, things like that. So first strike, haste, and then it has camouflage. 2, put a +1/+1 counter on Ultimate Spider-Man. He gains hexproof and becomes colorless until end of turn. And whenever you attack, double the number of each kind of counter on each spider and legendary creature you control. Now, 2 things worth noting. First of all, you can always play this card for the backside as well. So you can just cast Ultimate Spider-Man for 3 red, green, white if you would like to. If you don't need the Miles, if you just need to have a first strike haste creature right away, you can just play the Ultimate Spider-Man if you have that mana available. You cannot flip it back into Miles, but you wouldn't really want to because the Ultimate Spider-Man part of the card is better. So that's something that is new with flip cards in this set. It's also worth noting you can activate the camouflage ability as many times as you want. You can just spend 2 mana to put a +1/+1 counter onto that Ultimate Spider-Man. Having the ability to give him hexproof is also really scary because your opponent isn't going to really have a window to respond. Once you have flipped him over successfully and you just have your mana available, you just generally want to leave 2 mana up so you can always give him hexproof to protect against removal. So your opponent has a very limited window to respond to the card, and then you can just start stacking counters on him. When you attack, you double the number of counters on him. So it just takes over the game very quickly, and green has enough fixing to be able to let you get to that green, red, white mana value and just be able to cast this multicolored monster. So absolutely fantastic card for the Ultimate Spider-Man. Next, we have Agent Venom, which is 2 and a black for a 2/3 symbiote soldier hero with flash and menace, and whenever another non-token creature you control dies, you draw a card and lose 1 life. So this card's almost always going to be a nice little clean 2 for 1. Maybe your opponent attacks you with a 2/2 creature, you flash this in, eat their creature. Maybe your opponent targets one of your other creatures with a removal spell. You flash this in, you draw the card and lose a life when your other non-token creature dies. Maybe another one of your creatures is your opponent's attacking you. You're going to have a trade happen in combat. You flash this in to get that extra card. And so pretty much no matter how this card pans out, you're going to end up ahead and you're going to have a menace 2/3 creature that your opponent is going to then have to deal with before dealing with your other creatures, unless they want you to get extra cards, which they're not going to want to do. So they're going to then have to kill your Agent Venom before they kill your other creatures, which is also valuable in and of itself. So Agent Venom, just a nice, clean, easy little 2-for-1 that you're going to be happy to have. Next is Lizard, Connor's Curse. For 2 green, you get a 5/5 Lizard villain with Trample. And when Lizard Connor's Curse enters, up to 1 other target creature loses all abilities and becomes a green lizard creature with base power and toughness 4/4. So not only is this a massive creature as a 4-mana 5/5 trampler that just hits like a truck by itself, but when it comes into play, you make one of your other smaller creatures, so maybe you just have a 2/2 in play or something like that, you turn that into a 4/4, so you get to attack right away with it and just absolutely crush your opponent. So let's just imagine a general curve situation where you play a 2-drop, and then you play a 3-drop, and then you play Lizard, and turn your 2-drop into a 4/4 creature. Oftentimes, you don't get 4/4 worth of stats until you're playing 4 mana worth of creatures. So it's almost like you added 2 extra mana to the functional mana you've spent that game, or you basically played a 4-drop on turn 2 once you've got that Lizard Connor's Curse out. And also, you can shrink down your opponent's creature. So if they have like a 6/6 creature or something really problematic that has a really good ability or something like that, you can turn your opponent's creature into a Lizard as well. Lizard Connor's Curse, just not the most complex card, but absolutely going to be very powerful when you play it on turn 4, and even later in the game, you can turn your small creatures into big creatures, just make a huge board state with this one card. Next is Friendly Neighborhood. Speaking of board states, for 3 and a white, you get an enchantment aura. You enchant a land. When this aura enters, create 3 1/1 green and white human citizen creature tokens. So you've got a little bit of an army in a can type situation. And then enchanted land has 1 tap. Target creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn for each creature you control. Activate only as a sorcery. So sure, 4 mana to get 3 1/1s wouldn't be the greatest card. It would be okay. Sometimes you'd play it. But the fact that you can then turn one of your creatures each turn into a must-answer creature a lot of the time, you just, at the very least, because you're getting these 3 1/1s from this card, you're going to be able to give a creature +3/+3, so you can turn one of those 1/1s into a 4/4 attacker, which is pretty significant. But if you just have another couple of other creatures in play, you can give +4/+4, +5/+5, so you go 2-drop, 3-drop, Friendly Neighborhood. All of a sudden, the next turn, you can give one of your creatures +5/+5. It plays really well if you have an evasive creature, so anything with flying. If you have something with lifelink, you can gain a ton of life. And overall, it just is such an irritating thing for your opponent to deal with, because there's not as much enchantment removal. There's not really removal for lands. So you're just going to have this card in play, providing you a constant stream of advantage. You do want to make sure you're aggressive. You're going to be able to attack your opponent to really utilize this, because it can only be used at sorcery speed. But this card can be really, really scary, and it's really threatening in kind of the sort of way that's a little bit unassuming sometimes, because having an activated ability on a land like that is something that you can kind of overlook at times, but that's a really, really powerful ability to have access to, especially because it also gives you 3 1/1s. Next is Sandman, Shifting Scoundrel. For 1 green, you get a star sand elemental villain that says Sandman's power and toughness are each equal to the number of lands you control. Sandman can't be blocked by creatures with power 2 or less. And then 3 green, return this card and target land card from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. So it can be an absolutely massive creature, being like a 3 mana 6/6 or even 7/7 or more in the late game, a 3 mana 3/3 at its baseline. And it's really basically impossible to chump block, because it can't be blocked by creatures with power 2 or less, which is going to pretty much mean opponent can't just throw a 1/1 token in front of it or something like that. They're going to have to be trying to trade with this creature or just taking massive hits of damage. The fact that it has a recursion ability is also fantastic, because it means that if your opponent does answer this in combat, maybe they do manage to trade off with something in the late game, you're going to be able to bring it back, and potentially multiple times. Now, you do have to have a land card in your graveyard, because it says target land. It doesn't say up to 1 target land, but there are plenty of ways to fuel this by getting lands in your graveyard, by having self-mill in your deck, by like directly milling cards from your library into your graveyard. You can mill a land that way. There are cards that let you discard cards for value, so you can just discard a land from your hand to fuel it that way. And then there's a common land that sacrifices itself to fetch up a land from your deck, and so that's a really good synergy piece with Sandman as well, because it's a land that puts itself into your graveyard so that you can then bring Sandman back. And being able to bring Sandman back is a huge part of its power, because it doesn't just die to 1 removal spell. Sandman's coming back, he's going to be pressuring your opponent, and he gets even bigger over the course of the game, because you're going to have more and more lands in play. So unless they have an exile-based removal spell or an enchantment-based removal spell, it's going to keep this guy in play and locked down, Sandman is absolutely going to take over, and as a result is a fantastic card, a great threat, and just make sure that you have a couple of ways to put lands into your graveyard, and he'll be a key card that's going to help you win a lot of games. Next is Bioorganic Carapace. So for 2 white-blue, you get an artifact equipment that says when this equipment enters, attach it to target creature you control. So you're spotted that first equip. Equipped creature gets +2/+2 and has whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, draw a card for each modified creature you control. So that means equipment auras you control and counters or modifications. So if you have another equipment in play, or generally it's going to be +1/+1 counters on your creatures, so that's going to be the easiest way to have modified creatures. You can draw a couple of cards with this pretty easily. At the very least, you're going to draw 1 card because the equipped creature that has the Bioorganic Carapace is going to be modified. But also just having an equipment that you can spend 2 to give a creature +2/+2 is pretty nice. It's not that expensive to move it around. So in the late game, you can do something like attack in with your creature, then move the equipment to something else so that you can use it on blocks and defense. The fact that any of your creatures can then turn into a threat that kind of has to be answered because it's going to start drawing you cards and snowballing the game means that if you are into the sort of board stall where each of you has a couple of creatures, your opponent's going to really feel forced to like block your creatures and maybe have to chump block, things like that. So you don't get to draw 2 or 3 cards, and Bioorganic Carapace can absolutely take over the game, especially because white-blue is a strategy that focuses on having modifications. So there is going to be a situation where if you get a single hit in, you draw 3 cards and the game is just over, or if you curve out into this card, so you play 2-drop, 3-drop, play Bioorganic Carapace, your opponent's not going to be in a position a lot of the time to block whatever 3-drop that you have with +2/+2. So they're going to either have to let you draw that extra card, take a bunch of damage, or they're going to have to chump block or something like that in many, many cases. So this card is really, really excellent. Next is Scarlet Spider Ben Reilly. So for 1 green-red, you get a 4/3 Spider-Man human hero, has the web slinging ability, so you may cast this spell for red-green if you also return a tapped creature you control to its owner's hand. It has trample, so 3 mana 4/3 trample, already really good, the web sling ability, and then Sensational Save. If Scarlet Spider was cast using web slinging, he enters with X +1/+1 counters on him, where X is the mana value of the returned creature. So this card can be absolutely giant and have trample for relatively cheap. So let's just say you attack your opponent with your 4 mana creature, then you return it to your hand with Scarlet Spider Ben Reilly. All of a sudden you get an 8/7 creature because it's just the mana value of the returned creature. This thing really does help you swing racing situations a lot of the time. So if you're a little bit behind and your opponent's attacking you, sometimes you wouldn't be able to attack them back because you just have to rely on blocking with your creatures. But if you say have a 3 mana creature, you can then attack your opponent, play Scarlet Spider Ben Reilly, return that creature to your hand, and then it almost give it pseudo vigilance if you're in a point in the game where you have enough mana to do that, where let's say you have 5 mana, you return that 3-drop, you play the 3-drop again, you have the Scarlet Spider Ben Reilly in play, which you played as basically a 2 mana 7/6. That gave your creature pseudo vigilance, let you retrigger any enters effects, things like that. Really, really potent card. If you are on the aggressive, you can just get a giant trampling creature, which is also going to be helpful when you are attacking, because just getting giant tramplers, it tends to be helpful. It does put your eggs all in one basket a little bit, because sometimes you won't be able to replay the card that you web slinging back. So if you web slinging back maybe like a 3-drop and then you can't replay it the same turn, then your opponent kills Ben Reilly, you are a little bit behind. But because the web slinging ability only costs 2 mana, a lot of the times it's not going to be that big of a tempo hit, and the upside for when it works out for you is so massive that Scarlet Spider Ben Reilly is going to be an excellent card and an amazing Spider-Man for your deck. Next, and finally, is Dr. Octopus Master Planner. It's a little bit expensive as 5 blue-black, but you get a 4/8 human scientist villain. Other villains you control get +2/+2, and blue-black is the villain color combination, so that is a pretty relevant line of text. Your maximum hand size is 8, and at the beginning of your end step, if you have fewer than 8 cards in hand, draw cards equal to the difference. So this card is, at the very least, if you have a pretty much full hand, going to draw you at least a couple of cards, because you're going to have 7 cards maybe to start your hand. If you had a full hand to start your turn, you'd still like play land, play Dr. Octopus, draw a couple. But generally this thing's going to draw you like 4 or 5 cards when you play it on the end step. So your opponent's not going to be able to interact with it before it gets to draw you those cards, as long as they're tapped out or don't have an instant speed removal spell. It can also enable a huge attack if you have a couple of villains in play, and if your opponent doesn't kill it immediately, on the following turn you can just deploy a bunch more of your cards, draw back up to 8 cards, and the game's basically over. I mean, generally if they don't kill this, you're going to have a 4/8, you're going to have drawn 5 extra cards or something like that, and the game's going to be over. This is one of those cards where when you windmill slam it into play and it doesn't die instantly, you just feel like you can't lose the game. And that's just generally what you're looking for in your super bombs, in your super villains. And generally this is going to be a card that you are exceedingly happy to have in your deck. That's going to do it for this video, though. Thank you so much for watching. If you made it to the end, leave hashtag great power in the comments section down below, because with great power comes great decks in Magic the Gathering. That's going to do it for this one, though. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll talk to you next time.